The dusty envelope arrived at the boarding house on a Thursday morning in September of 1878, and when Delilah Sutton opened it to find a single photograph of a man she had never met, she knew with terrible certainty that her mother had finally lost her battle with consumption and taken the last secret to her grave. The photograph showed a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes standing beside a horse, his hand resting on the saddle. On the back, in her mother's weakening script, were only three words: your father, Daniel. No explanation, no address, no way to find him, and now no way to ask the questions that burned through Delilah's chest like wildfire. Her mother had promised to tell her everything when the time was right, but consumption did not wait for convenient moments or final confessions. 3 days ago, Margaret Sutton had drawn her last rattling breath in the charity ward of a Philadelphia hospital, and Delilah had held her hand and whispered that it was all right to let go, never knowing that the most important conversation they would ever have would now never happen. Delilah was 20 years old, alone in the world, and standing in a boarding house room that she could no longer afford. Her mother's seamstress work had barely kept them fed, and now even that small income had vanished like morning dew. She had perhaps 2 weeks before the landlady would demand payment or eviction, and the photograph in her hands felt like both a curse and a peculiar kind of salvation. She could not find her father. She did not even know if he was alive, but she could leave Philadelphia and its memories of sickness and struggle. She could go west, where people said a person could start over, could become someone new. She sold everything except her mother's wedding ring, which had never left Margaret's finger until the undertaker removed it, 2 dresses, a coat, and the photograph. The ticket agent looked at her as though she had lost her mind when she said she wanted to go to Colorado Territory. "That is wild country, miss," he said, his eyebrows raised skeptically. "Not suitable for a young woman traveling alone." "I have no reason to stay here," Delilah replied, and the flatness in her own voice surprised her. "Colorado City." "Colorado. How much?" The journey took 2 weeks by rail, and every mile carried her further from everything familiar and deeper into a landscape that seemed determined to prove the ticket agent right. The cities gave way to farmland, the farmland to prairie, and the prairie to something vast and unforgiving that made her feel simultaneously insignificant and strangely free. The other passengers changed at every stop, and she spoke to no one unless necessary. She slept with her small bag clutched to her chest and watched America unfold outside the window like a promise that might be broken. Colorado City announced itself with wooden buildings that looked temporary, as though the wind might blow them away at any moment, and mountains that rose to the west like the walls of heaven. Delilah stepped off the train into afternoon sunshine that felt different from Philadelphia light, sharper and cleaner, and immediately wondered what she was supposed to do next. She had enough money for perhaps a week in a boarding house if she was careful. She would need work, and quickly. The boarding house she found was run by a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, who looked Delilah up and down and said, "You are running from something or running to something. I do not care which as long as you pay on time and cause no trouble." "I need work," Delilah said. "I can sew. I can read and write. I can cook if necessary." "Can you teach?" Mrs. Hendricks asked, surprising her. "The school teacher left last month to get married, and the town council has been looking for a replacement. Pay is not much, but it comes regular." Hope flickered in Delilah's chest, fragile as candle flame. "I could teach. I attended school through the 8th grade. I helped my mother with reading lessons for the younger children in our building." "Then you should speak to Mayor Carson in the morning," Mrs. Hendricks said, and quoted a price for the room that would take most of Delilah's remaining money. "Breakfast is at 6. You miss it. You do not eat." That first night, Delilah lay in a narrow bed in a strange town, 1,000 miles from everything she had ever known, and allowed herself to cry for the first time since her mother's death. She wept silently into her pillow, grieving not just for Margaret, but for all the questions that would never be answered, for the father whose face she had seen once in a photograph and would never see again. She had not come west to find him. She knew that would be impossible. but some desperate part of her had imagined that perhaps by some miracle she might see a man on the street who looked like the photograph, might recognize something in the shape of a jaw or the color of eyes. Foolish, of course. Colorado territory was enormous, and her father could be anywhere or nowhere. He could have died years ago, never knowing he had a daughter. She woke before dawn, washed her face in the basin, and dressed in her better dress, which was still worn at the cuffs but clean and carefully mended. Mayor Carson had an office above the general store, and he looked surprised to see her when she knocked at 7 in the morning. "Mrs. Hendricks said you needed a school teacher," Delilah said without preamble. "I am Delilah Sutton from Philadelphia. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. I am a hard worker and I need employment." Mayor Carson was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. He studied her for a long moment. "You are very young." "I am 20. I have been helping support my mother since I was 12. Age does not determine ability." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, I suppose it does not. Can you start Monday? The children have been without proper schooling for 6 weeks now, and their parents are getting restless. We can offer $30 a month and use of the teacherage, a small cabin behind the schoolhouse. It is not much." $30 a month was more than her mother had made with her sewing. Delilah felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. "I can start Monday. Thank you, Mayor Carson." "Thank the last teacher for running off," he said dryly. Colorado City is not exactly overflowing with educated young women looking for work. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building at the edge of town, one room with a stove, rows of rough benches, and a desk at the front that had been carved with the initials of bored students. The teacherage was indeed small, hardly more than a shed, but it had a bed, a stove, a table, and a window that looked toward the mountains. It was hers, and that mattered more than size or comfort. She spent the weekend cleaning the schoolhouse and preparing lessons, and on Monday morning, 17 children aged 6 to 14 arrived with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Delilah stood before them in her mended dress with her heart pounding and introduced herself as Miss Sutton. And when the oldest boy in the back row made a comment about her being hardly older than him, she looked him in the eye and said, "Then you should have no trouble keeping up with the lessons, unless you would like to explain to your parents why you are falling behind a girl barely older than yourself." The other children laughed, and the boy subsided, and Delilah began to teach. The work was harder than she had expected and more rewarding. The children were sharp and curious, though many had missed significant schooling and had to be caught up. She stayed late most evenings, planning lessons and grading work by lamplight, and fell into bed exhausted. It was better than grieving. It was better than thinking about the photograph in her bag and the father she would never meet. Autumn settled over Colorado City with cold winds and early snow on the peaks. Delilah bought warmer clothes and learned to manage the stove in both the schoolhouse and the teacherage, and slowly the town began to feel less strange. Women nodded to her on the street. Parents stopped by to discuss their children's progress. Mrs. Hendricks invited her to Sunday dinner and told stories about the early days of the settlement that made Delilah laugh despite herself. It was late October when she first saw the cowboy. She had dismissed the children for the day and was sweeping the schoolhouse floor when she heard hoofbeats outside and looked up to see a man dismounting from a rangy chestnut gelding. He was tall and lean, with sandy brown hair and a weathered face that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. He tied the horse to the rail and approached the schoolhouse door, removing his hat as he did so. "Miss Sutton," he called, "do you have a moment?" Delilah set the broom aside and stepped to the door. Up close, the man had gray eyes and a serious expression. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe 25 or 26, with sun lines at the corners of his eyes and work-roughened hands. "I am Miss Sutton. How can I help you?" "Name is Vincent Ashford," he said. "I work at the Running Creek Ranch, about 5 miles north of town. The foreman, John Mitchell, he has a daughter, Emma. She is 8 years old. Her mother passed 2 years ago, and John has been teaching her himself, but he thinks she would do better with proper schooling. He asked if I would ride in and talk to you about it. Emma Mitchell, Delilah said, running through the mental list of her students. I do not believe I have her enrolled. No, madam. John has been worried about her riding to town alone each day. The ranch is a fair distance, and there are mountain lions and other dangers. But I have been thinking. Vincent hesitated, turning his hat in his hands. I could bring her in the mornings and pick her up in the afternoons. It would not be much trouble. I am usually working near enough to town that I could make the ride. Delilah studied him, this cowboy who was offering to ride 10 miles a day to ensure a little girl could attend school. That is very kind of you, Mr. Ashford, but it would take a significant amount of your time. Emma is a good kid, Vincent said simply. She deserves a proper education. And John, he has had a hard time since his wife died. If I can help, I want to. There was something in his voice, a quiet sincerity that made Delilah believe him. Then yes, of course. Emma is welcome to attend. Tell Mr. Mitchell to send her Monday morning, and I will make sure she catches up with the other students her age. Vincent's face relaxed into something that was almost a smile. Thank you, Miss Sutton. John will be grateful. So will Emma. He replaced his hat and turned to leave, then paused and looked back. If you do not mind my asking, you are not from around here, are you? Your accent, it is Eastern. Philadelphia, Delilah said. I arrived 2 months ago. That is a long way to come for a teaching position in a small town. I had my reasons for leaving, Delilah said, and her tone made it clear she would not be elaborating. Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. Well, welcome to Colorado City, Miss Sutton. I hope it treats you well. He rode away, and Delilah watched him go with a strange flutter in her chest that she told herself was nothing more than appreciation for his kindness to a child who needed schooling. She returned to her sweeping and did not think about him again until Monday morning when he arrived with Emma Mitchell, a shy girl with dark braids and her father's blue eyes. This is Miss Sutton, Vincent said, crouching down to Emma's level. She is going to be your teacher. You will do your best and make your father proud, all right? Emma nodded solemnly, and Vincent gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze before standing and tipping his hat to Delilah. I will be back at 3 o'clock. He was exactly on time, waiting by the schoolhouse door when Delilah dismissed the students. Emma ran to him with a smile, clutching a slate covered in careful letters, and Vincent listened attentively as she chattered about her first day. Delilah watched them ride away together and felt that flutter again, warmer this time. The routine continued. Every morning, Vincent brought Emma to school. Every afternoon, he picked her up. He was always polite, always punctual, and gradually they began to exchange more than just pleasantries. He asked how Emma was progressing. She asked about the ranch. He mentioned that the early snow meant a hard winter coming. She said she had never experienced a true Western winter and hoped the teacherage stove would be sufficient. If it is not, you let someone know, Vincent said seriously. Winter here is no joke. People freeze to death. That is a cheerful thought, Delilah said, but she smiled to take the edge off. Just being honest, Vincent said. You are a long way from Philadelphia, Miss Sutton. Things are different here. I have noticed, Delilah said dryly, and he surprised her by laughing. November brought the first real snow, heavy flakes that turned the world white and made the trip from the teacherage to the schoolhouse a cold trudge. Delilah wrapped herself in every layer she owned and kept the stove burning hot, and the children arrived pink-cheeked and shivering. Vincent and Emma came through the snow without complaint, though Emma's horse looked less enthusiastic. One afternoon, Vincent lingered after the other children had left, watching Delilah add wood to the stove. Your stove in the teacherage, is it keeping the place warm enough? Mostly, Delilah said, which was not entirely true. The teacherage was drafty, and she had woken the last few mornings to ice on the inside of the window. Vincent's expression told her he did not believe her. I could take a look at it if you like. Check for drafts. Make sure the stovepipe is properly sealed. Would not take long. Delilah hesitated. It seemed improper to invite a man to her cabin, even for such a practical reason. But it also seemed foolish to refuse help when she was genuinely worried about making it through the winter. That would be very kind of you, Mr. Ashford. Vincent, he said, we see each other every day. Seems foolish to stand on formality. Vincent, then, and you may call me Delilah, at least when there are no students present to hear. He smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. All right, Delilah. He returned the next afternoon with tools and a bag of rags for stuffing drafts. Delilah waited outside, feeling awkward, while he inspected the teacherage. He emerged 20 minutes later, shaking his head. The chinking between the logs is coming loose in several places, and your stovepipe has a gap that is letting smoke and cold air in. I have patched what I can, but you should ask Mayor Carson to have someone do a proper job before the worst of winter hits. Thank you, Delilah said, meaning it. I appreciate your help. Not a problem. Vincent hesitated, then added, You know, if the cold gets too bad, Mrs. Hendricks would probably take you back for the winter. No shame in admitting the teacherage is not suitable. I will manage, Delilah said, more sharply than she intended. I have dealt with difficult situations before. Vincent raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I am sure you have. Just offering options. She softened. I apologize. That was rude. I am not accustomed to accepting help. Why not? The question surprised her. I suppose because there was never much help available. My mother and I, we managed on our own. Your mother did not come west with you? Delilah looked away, toward the mountains that were turning gold in the late afternoon light. She passed away in September. Consumption. I came west because there was nothing left for me in Philadelphia. She heard Vincent take a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. I am sorry. That is a hard thing. Yes, Delilah said simply. It was. They stood in silence for a moment, and then Vincent said, My father died when I was 16. Ranch accident. My mother passed the following winter. Sometimes I think she died of grief as much as illness, so I understand something of what you are feeling. Delilah looked at him, at this cowboy who had lost his parents young and somehow kept going, and felt a connection settle between them like a rope pulled taut. How did you manage? Worked, Vincent said. Kept moving. Found people who needed help and helped them. That is how I ended up at Running Creek Ranch. John Mitchell gave me a job when I was 17 and had nothing to my name but a horse and a saddle. He has been more of a father to me than my own father ever was, truth be told. And now you make sure his daughter gets to school, Delilah said, understanding. Yes, Vincent said, it is the least I can do. The conversation stayed with Delilah through the evening as she prepared lessons and ate a simple supper. She found herself thinking about Vincent's words, about loss and moving forward and finding ways to help others. She had been so focused on surviving, on not thinking about her mother or the father she would never know, that she had not considered what might come after survival, what life might look like if she allowed herself to build something here in this cold town at the edge of the mountains. Winter deepened. The snow piled high, and the children arrived at school bundled like small bears. Delilah taught them mathematics and reading and history, and in the afternoons, she sometimes allowed them to recite poetry or sing songs, anything to keep spirits up during the long, dark months. Emma Mitchell proved to be a bright student, hungry for learning, and she attached herself to Delilah with the intensity of a child who had lost her mother and found someone who might fill a small part of that void. Vincent continued to bring Emma and pick her up, and his conversations with Delilah grew longer. They talked about books, about the differences between Eastern and Western life, about the strange beauty of Colorado winters. He mentioned that he had taught himself to read from his mother's Bible and whatever books he could borrow. She told him about helping her mother with sewing in their cramped Philadelphia apartment and how strange it was to see so much open space. She did not tell him about the photograph. She did not mention her father. That pain was still too private, too raw. In December, a blizzard struck that lasted 3 days and left snowdrifts as high as the schoolhouse windows. Delilah dismissed school and huddled in the teacherage, burning through her supply of wood and wondering if Vincent had been right about the danger of western winters. On the third day, when the storm finally broke, there was a knock on her door, and she opened it to find Vincent standing there with a bag of supplies. "Wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, snow crusting his hat and shoulders. "Brought you some extra firewood and food in case you were running low." Delilah stared at him, at this man who had ridden through a blizzard to check on her, and felt something crack open in her chest. "You did not have to do that." "I know," Vincent said, "but I wanted to." She invited him in because it seemed cruel to leave him standing in the cold, and he stacked the firewood by the stove and set the bag of food on her table. Bacon, beans, coffee, flour, staples that would last. "How much do I owe you?" Delilah asked. "Nothing," Vincent said. "Consider it a welcome to Colorado gift." "Vincent, I cannot accept charity." "It is not charity. It is neighbors helping neighbors. That is how people survive out here." He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "You are not in Philadelphia anymore, Delilah. You do not have to do everything alone." The words hit harder than they should have. Delilah felt tears prick her eyes and turned away, angry at herself for showing weakness. "I have always managed alone." "That does not mean you have to keep doing it." She heard him move closer, and then his hand was on her shoulder, warm even through her layers of clothing. The touch was gentle, tentative, and it broke something in her. She turned and found herself crying, really crying, for the first time since that first night in Colorado City. Vincent did not say anything, just pulled her into an embrace that smelled of leather and cold air and let her sob into his coat. When she finally pulled away, embarrassed and red-faced, he offered her his handkerchief. "I am sorry," Delilah managed. "I do not know what came over me." "Grief," Vincent said quietly. "It does not go away just because you ignore it." "Is that the voice of experience?" "Yes." She wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "Thank you for the supplies, and for checking on me. It was kind." "You are welcome." Vincent hesitated, then said, "Delilah, I hope you do not think I am overstepping, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I am a decent listener." "Why?" The question came out more bluntly than she intended. "Why do you care?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. "Because you remind me of myself at 20, alone and trying to figure out how to keep going, and because I wish someone had told me it was all right to accept help. Would have saved me a lot of hard years." Delilah looked at him, really looked, and saw the scars of his own losses in the lines of his face. "You are a good man, Vincent Ashford." "I try to be," he said simply. After he left, Delilah sat by the stove and thought about what he had said. You do not have to do everything alone. It was a foreign concept, but not an unwelcome one. She had spent so long being strong, being the one her mother leaned on, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer support without expecting anything in return. She began to notice things about Vincent, the way he always made sure Emma was settled before he left in the mornings, the care he took with his horse, checking hooves and tack before riding, the way he listened when Delilah talked, really listened, as though her words mattered. He never pressed for information she did not offer, never made her feel weak for having fled Philadelphia and her grief. Christmas came, and the town put together a modest celebration at the church. Delilah attended and found herself standing next to Vincent during the carol singing. His voice was surprisingly good, a clear baritone that blended well with her alto. When the service ended and people milled about eating cookies and drinking coffee, Emma dragged both of them over to meet her father. John Mitchell was a weathered man in his 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Miss Sutton, I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for Emma. She comes home every day excited about learning. It has been good for her. She is a wonderful student, Delilah said sincerely. You should be very proud. I am. John glanced at Vincent with something that might have been amusement. And I hear Vincent has been making the trip to town twice a day, every day without complaint. It is no trouble, Vincent said, his ears going slightly red. Sure it is not, John said, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. Well, I appreciate it all the same, both of you. Walking back to the teacherage that night under a sky full of cold stars, Delilah thought about John Mitchell's expression and what it might imply. Did people think there was something between her and Vincent? The idea should have alarmed her, but instead it sent a warm flutter through her stomach. She was developing feelings for the cowboy. The realization struck her as she lay in bed that night, listening to the wind howl around the teacherage. Vincent had somehow slipped past her defenses with his quiet kindness and steady presence. He had not tried to replace what she had lost or fix her grief. He had simply stood beside her, offering support when she needed it and space when she did not. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. January brought bitter cold and a brief thaw that turned the streets to mud. Delilah struggled with a head cold that left her hoarse and exhausted, but she continued teaching because the children needed schooling and she needed the income. Vincent noticed immediately. You look terrible, he said bluntly when he dropped Emma off one morning. Thank you so much, Delilah said, her voice barely above a rasp. I meant you look sick. You should be resting. I will rest when school is finished for the day. Vincent frowned but did not argue. That afternoon, when he picked up Emma, he handed Delilah a small jar. Honey from the ranch. Put it in hot water with lemon if you have it. Helps with sore throats. Delilah took the jar, touched by the gesture. Thank you, Vincent. Take care of yourself, he said, and there was genuine concern in his eyes. The honey helped. So did the knowledge that someone cared whether she recovered. Delilah found herself looking forward to Vincent's arrivals and departures, to the brief conversations that had become the brightest parts of her day. She told herself it was foolish, that she barely knew him, that developing feelings for a cowboy in a town where she had lived for only 4 months was the height of impracticality. But hearts, she was discovering, did not care much for practicality. In February, a warm spell broke the back of winter and brought the first hints of spring. The snow began to melt, turning the streets to rivers of mud, and the children grew restless with the promise of warmer weather. Delilah planned a lesson on the natural history of Colorado and took the students outside to look for signs of spring. They found buds on trees, tracks in the mud that might have been deer, and Emma discovered a patch of early wildflowers that made her squeal with delight. Vincent arrived to pick up Emma just as the lesson was ending. He sat his horse and watched as the children explored, and when Delilah caught his eye, he smiled. This is good for them. Emma especially. She has been cooped up all winter. They all have, Delilah said, including me. I had forgotten what sunshine felt like. You should get out more, Vincent said. Take walks when the weather allows. The country around here is beautiful in spring. I would like that, Delilah said, then hesitated. Perhaps you could show me sometime, if you are not too busy. Vincent's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something warmer. I would like that too. How about Sunday afternoon? I could meet you here after church, and we could ride out to some of the prettier spots. Delilah's heart was hammering. I do not have a horse. You can ride double with me if you do not mind, or I can borrow a gentle mare from the ranch. Double would be fine, Delilah said, feeling her face heat. If it is not improper. I think we have moved past worrying about impropriety, Vincent said quietly. Do not you? She met his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. Yes, I think we have. Sunday arrived clear and mild, the first truly spring-like day of the year. Delilah wore her better dress and worried that she was overdressed for a ride into the countryside, but Vincent's face when he saw her made the effort worthwhile. He helped her mount behind him, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, acutely aware of the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his breathing. They rode north out of town, following a trail that climbed into the foothills. Vincent pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area: a meadow where wild horses sometimes grazed, a creek that ran clear and cold even in the height of summer, a overlook where you could see for miles across the plains. They stopped at the overlook and dismounted. The view was stunning, the land spreading out below them in shades of brown and green, the mountains rising behind them still capped with snow. Delilah stood at the edge and felt small in the best possible way. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Yes," Vincent agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the view. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Delilah's breath caught. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." "All right." She turned to face him fully, her heart racing. "I came to Colorado to run away from my grief, from my mother's death, and everything that came with it. I did not expect to find anything here except maybe peace and a fresh start. But I have found more than that. I have found purpose in teaching. I have found a community. And I have found you." Vincent stepped closer, his gray eyes locked on hers. "I am glad you came to Colorado. I am glad you stayed. And I am glad I got to know you." "I care about you," Delilah said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I did not mean to, and I know it is complicated, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel something when you are near." "Complicated how?" Vincent asked gently. "I am still grieving my mother. I am still figuring out who I am without her. And there is something I have never told you." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I never knew my father. My mother never married, and she never told me who he was. She promised she would, when the time was right, but she died before she could. All I have is a photograph with his name on the back. Daniel, that is all I know." Delilah pulled the photograph from her pocket and handed it to Vincent. "She sent me this just before she died. No explanation, no way to find him. Just this picture of a man I will never meet." Vincent studied the photograph carefully, then looked up at her. "That must be incredibly hard." "It is," Delilah admitted. "I feel like part of me is missing, and I will never be able to find it. I will never know where I came from or why my mother kept it secret. And sometimes I wonder if that broken piece of me makes it impossible to be whole for someone else." Vincent handed back the photograph and took both her hands in his. "Delilah, listen to me. You are not broken. You are dealing with loss and unanswered questions, and that is hard, but it does not make you less. And I am not trying to replace what you have lost. I could never replace your mother or the father you never knew. I am just a man who cares about you and wants to stand beside you if you will let me." Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but they were not entirely sad. "I want that too. I want you in my life, Vincent, but I need you to understand that I am still figuring things out. I may have bad days. I may be difficult. I suspect I will be difficult too, from time to time," Vincent said with a small smile. "We can figure it out together." He pulled her into an embrace, and Delilah let herself lean into his strength, let herself believe that maybe she did not have to carry everything alone. When she pulled back and looked up at him, Vincent cupped her face gently and asked, "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Delilah whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet and tasted of new beginnings. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling, and the world felt full of possibility. They rode back to town slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Vincent told her about his dreams of someday having his own ranch, a small place where he could raise horses. Delilah admitted that she loved teaching, but sometimes missed the energy of a city. They talked about books and music and whether Colorado would ever become a state. By the time they reached the teacherage, the sun was setting, and Delilah felt lighter than she had in months. "Can I see you again?" Vincent asked. Not just at the school, but like this? I would be disappointed if you did not ask, Delilah said. Next Sunday, then. I will take you to the creek I mentioned. We can have a picnic. That sounds wonderful. He kissed her again, a brief press of lips that left her wanting more, and then rode away. Delilah went inside and sat on her bed, holding the photograph of her father and feeling for the first time that maybe it was all right that she would never know him. Maybe it was all right to move forward and build a life with the people who were here, who cared about her, who stood beside her instead of trying to fill the spaces left by loss. The next weeks passed in a blur of school days and Sunday rides with Vincent. They explored the countryside around Colorado City, finding quiet places to talk and be together. Delilah learned that Vincent was thoughtful and patient, that he had a quiet sense of humor and a deep well of kindness. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, that she had a sharp mind and a sharper tongue when provoked, and that she loved poetry even though she pretended not to. The town began to talk, of course. Mrs. Hendricks commented that the school teacher and the cowboy made a handsome pair. Mayor Carson asked Delilah if she planned to continue teaching, with a significant look that suggested he knew about her budding romance. Delilah assured him that she had no plans to leave her position, and he seemed satisfied. John Mitchell invited both Delilah and Vincent to dinner at the ranch one Sunday, and Emma was so excited she could barely sit still through the meal. Afterward, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, John said quietly, "Vincent is like a son to me. I want to see him happy. And you make him happy, Miss Sutton." "He makes me happy, too," Delilah said honestly. "Good. That is all I wanted to know." Spring turned to summer, and school let out for the season. Delilah had expected to feel lost without the structure of teaching, but instead she found herself enjoying the freedom. She spent her days reading, exploring the town, and seeing Vincent whenever his work allowed. They talked about the future in careful, tentative terms. Vincent admitted that he was saving money to buy land. Delilah said she wanted to keep teaching, but maybe in a bigger school someday. Neither of them spoke about marriage, but it hung in the air between them, a question waiting to be asked. In July, Vincent took her to a dance at the town hall. It was a simple affair, fiddle music and wooden floors and people dressed in their best. Delilah had not danced in years, but Vincent was patient, guiding her through the steps and laughing when she stumbled. They waltzed under lantern light, and when the music slowed, he pulled her close and whispered, "I love you, Delilah Sutton." Her heart stopped, then raced. "I love you too, Vincent Ashford." He kissed her there on the dance floor, in front of the whole town, and Delilah did not care who saw. This was her life now. This man, this place, this community. She had run from Philadelphia to escape her grief, but she had found something better than escape. She had found a home. In August, on a warm evening when the sky was full of stars, Vincent came to the teacherage and knocked on the door. Delilah opened it to find him standing there in his best clothes, hat in hand, and nervous as she had ever seen him. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." He stepped inside and stood awkwardly in the middle of the small room. "I have been thinking a lot lately, about the future, about what I want." "And what do you want?" Delilah asked, her heart beginning to pound. "You," Vincent said simply. "I want a life with you. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep beside you. I want to build something together, a ranch or a home or just a partnership. I know it has only been a year since you came to Colorado, and I know you are still dealing with your losses, but I also know that I love you and I want to marry you." He dropped to one knee and pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a small garnet. "This was my mother's ring. It is not much, but it is what I have to offer. Delilah Sutton, will you marry me?" Delilah felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They kissed, and Delilah felt all the broken pieces of herself click into place. She would never know her father. She would carry that loss with her always. But Vincent was right. He was not trying to replace what she had lost. He was simply standing beside her, offering his hand and his heart, and that was enough. That was everything. They were married in September, 1 year after Delilah had arrived in Colorado City. The ceremony was simple, held at the church with most of the town in attendance. Emma Mitchell was the flower girl, beaming with pride. John Mitchell gave Delilah away, which made her cry. Mrs. Hendricks cried too, and even Mayor Carson looked misty-eyed. Delilah wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Vincent had bought her, pale blue with lace at the collar. Vincent wore his best suit and looked so handsome it made her heart ache. They exchanged vows in front of the preacher, promising to love and honor each other. And when Vincent kissed her, Delilah felt the last of her grief transform into something else. Not forgetting, but moving forward. Not replacing, but building anew. They moved into a small house on the edge of town that Vincent had been renting in preparation for this day. It was modest but well built, with 2 rooms and a porch that faced the mountains. Delilah continued teaching when school resumed, and Vincent continued working at Running Creek Ranch, but now they came home to each other every evening. They cooked dinner together and talked about their days and fell asleep in each other's arms, and it was the most natural thing in the world. In November, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent on a Sunday morning, nervous about his reaction, and he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing with joy. "We are going to have a baby. Delilah, we are going to have a family. Are you happy?" she asked, even though the answer was obvious. "I am happier than I have ever been," Vincent said, his hands on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything I thought I had lost. Purpose, love, a future, and now a child. How could I be anything but happy?" Delilah gave birth in July of 1880 to a healthy baby boy they named Thomas Daniel Ashford. The middle name was for the father Delilah had never known, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future. Thomas had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair, and he was the most perfect thing Delilah had ever seen. Vincent was a devoted father, coming home from the ranch as early as he could to spend time with his son. He would hold Thomas for hours, talking to him softly about horses and the ranch and the mountains. Delilah would watch them together and feel a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what family felt like. Not blood alone, but choice. Not replacing what was lost, but building something new. When Thomas was 6 months old, John Mitchell approached Vincent with an offer. He was getting older, he said, and needed help managing Running Creek Ranch. Would Vincent consider becoming a partner? It would mean more responsibility, but also more income and a stake in the ranch's future. Vincent discussed it with Delilah that night. "It is a good opportunity, but it would mean longer hours, at least at first. And I know you are managing the house and Thomas and your teaching." "Take the partnership," Delilah said firmly. "This is your dream, Vincent. We will manage the rest." He did, and it proved to be the right decision. Vincent thrived with the additional responsibility, and the extra income allowed them to save toward their goal of eventually buying their own land. Delilah reduced her teaching hours, working only part-time so she could care for Thomas, and found that she loved being a mother even more than she had expected. Emma Mitchell, now 11, became a regular visitor to their home, enchanted by baby Thomas. She would hold him carefully and tell him stories. And Delilah thought about how life connected people in unexpected ways. If she had not come to Colorado, if Emma had not needed schooling, if Vincent had not offered to bring her to town, none of this would have happened. Time passed as it does. Thomas grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved horses and following his father around the ranch. In 1882, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Clara Margaret Ashford, after Vincent's mother and Delilah's mother. Clara had her mother's smile and her father's quiet, determination, and she completed their family in a way Delilah had not known was missing. Colorado became a state in 1876, and Colorado City continued to grow. The railroad brought more people, and the town expanded. Mayor Carson retired, and a new mayor took his place. Mrs. Hendricks passed away peacefully in her sleep, and Delilah cried at the funeral, remembering the stern woman who had given her a chance when she had nothing. In 1885, John Mitchell decided to retire fully from ranch management and offered to sell his share of Running Creek Ranch to Vincent and another longtime ranch hand. It was more than they could afford, but John was generous with the terms, and Vincent signed the papers with shaking hands. At 32, he was part owner of one of the most successful ranches in the region. "We did it," he said to Delilah that night. "We actually did it." "You did it," Delilah corrected. "You worked hard and earned this." "We did it together," Vincent insisted. "I could not have done any of this without you." It was true in its way. They had built their life together, stone by stone, decision by decision. Delilah had continued teaching part-time, had managed their household, had raised their children. Vincent had worked himself nearly to exhaustion building the ranch, but they had done it side by side, supporting each other through hard times and celebrating the good. As the years passed, Delilah sometimes took out the photograph of her father and looked at it. The ache of not knowing had faded to something gentler, a wistful sadness rather than an open wound. She had made peace with the fact that she would never know where she came from, not fully, but she knew where she was going, and that was enough. Thomas grew tall and strong, with his father's love of horses and his mother's quick mind. Clara was bright and stubborn, determined to do everything her older brother did and more. They were good children, and they were growing up in a home filled with love and stability, which was more than Delilah had ever had. In 1888, when Emma Mitchell turned 18, she came to Delilah and Vincent and announced that she was engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was set for October, and Emma asked Delilah to help her with the planning. As they sat together sewing trim on Emma's wedding dress, Emma said quietly, "You know, you and Vincent changed my life." "How so?" Delilah asked. "When my mother died, I thought I would never be happy again. Father was lost in his grief, and I was just this sad little girl. But then you came to town, and Vincent arranged for me to go to school, and suddenly I had purpose again. I had people who cared about me. You showed me that life goes on after loss, that there can be joy again." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Emma, you helped me too. Teaching you, watching you grow. It reminded me why I came west in the first place, to start over, to build something new." They hugged, and Delilah thought about how much had changed in the 10 years since she had arrived in Colorado City. She had been a frightened, grieving 20-year-old with nothing but a train ticket and a photograph. Now she was 30, married to a man she loved deeply, mother to 2 beautiful children, and part of a community that had embraced her. She had built a life from nothing, and it was a good life. Vincent came home that evening to find Delilah sitting on the porch, watching Thomas and Clara play in the yard. He settled beside her and took her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," Delilah said. "How far we have come. How different my life is from what I imagined when I left Philadelphia." "Better or worse?" "So much better," Delilah said honestly. "I never could have imagined this. You, our children, this life." Vincent squeezed her hand. "I love you, Delilah. I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun set behind the mountains. Delilah thought about the photograph tucked away in her dresser, about the father she had never known and never would. There had been a time when that not knowing had felt like a wound that would never heal. But Vincent had shown her that you could move forward without forgetting, that you could build new family without erasing the old. He had not tried to replace her father or fill that space. He had simply stood beside her, offering his strength when she needed it, and his love always. That was the greatest gift he could have given her. Not answers to her questions about the past, but partnership in building the future. In 1890, Vincent and his partner bought out the rest of Running Creek Ranch, and Vincent became the sole owner after his partner decided to move to California. It was a bittersweet moment, the fulfillment of a lifelong dream mixed with the nostalgia of change. John Mitchell had passed away the previous winter, and Emma and her husband had moved to Denver. The world kept changing, kept moving forward, but some things remained constant. Delilah still taught, now as the head teacher at the expanded Colorado City School. Vincent still worked the ranch from dawn to dusk. Thomas, at 10, was already talking about being a rancher like his father. Clara, at 8, wanted to be a teacher like her mother. And every evening the family gathered for dinner and talked about their days and made plans for the future. In 1892, Colorado City officially became a city, and the celebration lasted 3 days. Vincent and Delilah attended the festivities with their children, watching fireworks explode over the mountains and dancing to fiddle music in the street. Thomas danced with Clara, both of them laughing, and Vincent pulled Delilah close and said, "Remember when we first danced together at the town hall? I remember you telling me you loved me," Delilah said. "I meant it then. I mean it now. I will mean it forever." She kissed him there under the fireworks, surrounded by the community that had become her home, and felt blessed beyond measure. As the century drew to a close, Delilah began writing down her story. She wanted Thomas and Clara to know where they came from, not just their father's history, but hers as well. She wrote about Philadelphia and her mother's death. She wrote about the train ride west and the terror and hope of starting over. She wrote about becoming a teacher, about meeting Vincent, about falling in love, and she wrote about the photograph and the father she had never known. She explained to her children that not all wounds heal completely, but that you can learn to live with the scars. She told them that family is not just blood, it is choice and commitment and standing beside each other through hard times. When she showed the manuscript to Vincent, he read it carefully and then looked up with tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful, Delilah, and important. Our children should know this. I want them to understand that it is all right to have questions without answers," Delilah said. "That it is all right to grieve what you have lost while still embracing what you have found." In 1895, Thomas left home to attend the new university in Boulder, with plans to study agriculture and bring modern ranching methods back to Running Creek. It was hard to watch him go, but Delilah was proud of the young man he had become. Thoughtful, hardworking, kind. Vincent's son in all the ways that mattered. Clara showed no signs of wanting to leave, declaring that she was perfectly happy in Colorado City and planned to teach at the school where her mother had once worked. She was 15 now, bright and opinionated, and Delilah saw so much of her younger self in Clara's determination. In 1898, as America went to war with Spain, Delilah and Vincent celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. The whole town turned out for the party, held at Running Creek Ranch under a tent because the house was not big enough to hold everyone. There were speeches and toasts, and John Mitchell's daughter Emma came from Denver with her 3 children to attend. "To Vincent and Delilah," Mayor Harrison said, raising his glass, "who have shown us all what love and commitment look like. May you have 20 more years together." "At least," Vincent said, pulling Delilah close and kissing her to the cheers of the crowd. That night, lying in bed in the house they had built together, Delilah thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Colorado City 20 years earlier, lost and grieving and afraid, with nothing but a train ticket and a photograph of a father she would never know. She had come west to escape, but she had found so much more. She had found purpose and community and love. She had found Vincent, who had never tried to replace what she had lost, but had simply stood beside her, offering his hand and his heart. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, pulling her closer. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Delilah said. "I would argue that I am the luckiest man." She smiled against his chest. We can both be lucky. I will agree to that. They fell asleep, tangled together, as they had every night for 20 years, and Delilah's last thought before sleep took her was that she had been wrong all those years ago. She was not broken. She never had been. She had just been waiting to find the person who would stand beside her and help her see her own strength. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. Thomas returned from university with a degree and new ideas for the ranch. Clara announced her engagement to a young lawyer in town who Vincent approved of after much scrutiny. And Delilah and Vincent, now in their 40s, looked toward the future with the confidence of people who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. In 1903, Thomas married a girl from Denver and brought her home to Running Creek Ranch. In 1904, Clara married her lawyer and moved into a house in town. In 1905, Delilah became a grandmother when Thomas's wife gave birth to a little girl they named Margaret after both grandmothers. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Delilah thought about the cycle of life and family and legacy. Margaret would grow up knowing both her grandfathers through stories and love, even though Delilah's own father remained a mystery. But that was all right. Vincent had shown her that family was not just about blood and lineage. It was about the people who chose to stand beside you, who loved you through hard times, and celebrated with you in good times. "What do you think?" Thomas asked, watching his mother hold his daughter. "I think she's perfect," Delilah said. "And I think you are going to be wonderful parents." "We learned from the best," Thomas said, and the look he gave Vincent and Delilah made her throat tight. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Vincent's hair went gray at the temples. Delilah's hands grew less steady with age. The ranch prospered under Thomas's management. Clara had 3 children who visited their grandparents every Sunday without fail. The automobile came to Colorado City, and electricity, and telephones. The world was changing faster than Delilah could sometimes keep track of. But some things remained constant. Sunday dinners with the whole family, evening walks with Vincent when the weather was good, the view of the mountains from their porch, the feeling of coming home at the end of the day to the person you loved most in the world. In 1910, on their 32nd wedding anniversary, Vincent gave Delilah a gift wrapped in brown paper. She opened it to find a leather-bound book, beautifully made, with our story embossed on the cover. "I had your manuscript bound," Vincent explained, "so Thomas and Clara and the grandchildren can read it, so they will know where they came from and what it took to build this life." Delilah flipped through the pages, seeing her own words preserved in fine leather and good paper, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. "This is the best gift you could have given me." "You gave me everything first," Vincent said. "You took a chance on a cowboy who had nothing but a horse and a dream. You built this life with me, Delilah. Every good thing I have is because you came to Colorado City that day." "I came running from grief," Delilah said. "I never expected to find so much joy." "Neither did I, but I am grateful every day that you stepped off that train." They sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains as they had done countless times over the past 3 decades. Delilah thought about the photographs she had carried from Philadelphia, about the father named Daniel she had never known and never would. The not knowing had been hard once, a wound that had felt like it would never heal, but time and love had transformed it into something gentler, a wistful curiosity rather than an open pain. Vincent had taught her that you did not need to know where you came from to know where you belonged. He had stood beside her through grief and joy, through hard years and prosperous ones, and he had never once tried to replace what she had lost. He had simply offered his partnership, his love, his steady presence. And that had been enough. That had been everything. "I love you," Delilah said, reaching for Vincent's hand. "I love you too," he replied, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Always have. Always will." The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Somewhere in the house they could hear the sound of their grandchildren playing, their laughter bright and clear. Thomas was talking to Clara about ranch business. The smell of dinner cooking drifted from the kitchen. This was her life. Not the one she had imagined as a grieving 20-year-old on a train heading west, but something better, something real and solid and good. A life built not on replacing the past, but on embracing the future. A life shared with a man who had never tried to fill the spaces left by loss, but had simply stood beside her, offering his hand. And that, Delilah thought, as Vincent squeezed her hand and smiled at her in the fading light, was the truest kind of love. Not dramatic or consuming, but steady and sure. The kind of love that lasted through decades and challenges. The kind of love that built families and legacies. The kind of love that had transformed a lost, grieving girl into a woman who knew exactly where she belonged. As stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Delilah leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder and let herself be content. The photograph of her father was still tucked away in her dresser drawer, a reminder of questions that would never be answered. But beside her sat the answer to questions she had not known to ask, the partner she had needed, the love she had found, the home she had built. She had never known her father and never would, but Vincent Ashford had not tried to replace him. He had simply stood beside her, and that had made all the difference.